From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Welcome to beautiful Northwest Georgia and the campus of Berry College. It is January 5th, 2026, typically a pretty sleepy day on the political calendar. Not this year. Today is the final day of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's time in Congress. She is resigning her seat in the House of Representatives today, and we are going to break it all down, how we got here and what comes next.
A lot of questions, and we are so happy to be here at Berry College. Thank you for everyone making this possible, and thank you to our panel of experts joining us today. We have Eric Sands, political science professor here at Berry College, Fred Hicks, Democratic strategist on the Georgia Vote, as well as Joshua Edmonds, Republican strategist on the Georgia Vote, returning panelist, brand new panelist here. Eric, thank you so much for being here. And we have so much to dive into for the next 30 minutes, the final day in Congress for Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. A lot of people up here really love her. They also love President Trump, but the two we know have had their differences, Zach.
Yeah, and I think, Professor, this is maybe a good time to bring you in. We have a tradition here. The newcomer on the panel always gets the first question, so welcome. These guys have all been through it too. But you live here, you work here. We're in Floyd County. This is the heart of Congresswoman Greene's district. Over the last 5 years or so, as she has entered the political scene and then risen to prominence, what has it been like for the people in her district here and for somebody like yourself who studies politics here?
As you put it, her constituents love her. There's almost a sense in which she can do no wrong in their eyes. The other piece is her very, very close attachment to Donald Trump.
And you bring that up, guys. We have followed this arc, and Faith alluded to it. The Congresswoman, one of the staunchest allies of President Trump through all three of his presidential campaigns. Obviously, that broke down somewhere along the way. Joshua, you're a Republican strategist. On this day, what stands out to you?
You know, it feels to me like sort of like the dawning of a new era for this district, because you have such a traditional rural Republican history leading up through Tom Graves, and then you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, which was sort of a much different flavor of politics than I think many were used to, particularly in this district. And now with their departure, there's sort of this crossroads. Which direction will the 14th district go for their next congressperson? Is it going to be someone more like Marjorie Taylor Greene? Is it going to be someone more like Tom Graves, someone in between? I think this is a linchpin moment for the district in sort of picking their future. Who are they going to be as a district when people talk about Georgia 14? That's going to be up to them to decide, and today is the beginning of that.
And I think a lot of people are really looking closely to District 14, as you were saying, Josh. Some people wondering, will this district remain as red as it has been? A lot of people say, well, of course it will, but some others look at it and say, maybe we're going toward more purple. I say that because you look at some of the rhetoric that Congresswoman Greene has had, I guess, recently. Some Democrats agreeing with the words that she was saying, when years ago they would never, ever, ever agree with a word that she said. Fred, are you seeing that?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head when you said as red as it used to be. I think most people expect that in a normal election cycle, it will continue to be a red area. But with her leaving Congress right now, it's going to be a special election, which means that partisanship is not really as much of an issue on the ballot, and that creates a real opportunity. But when you take into account the special election and the conditions that the country's going through right now. This is an area that supports isolationism, yet the U.S. is increasingly engaged in international affairs. This is an area that supports or pull yourself up by the bootstraps, yet we know that middle and lower income Americans are starting to suffer. And we know from Marjorie Taylor Greene's own comments that this is an area where allowing the healthcare subsidies to lapse will really hit, or have already made a significant impact on people's pockets. So I think all these conditions go back to your phrase of will it be as red as it has been? Possibly, probably not.
The theme that's coming out just in this early part of this conversation is evolution and change and the march of time. If we have it back in the control room, guys, this might be a good time to play a little bit of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's speech in Macon at a rally supporting President Donald Trump in November of 2024, just about a year and change ago. Take a listen to what she had to say then.
January 6, 2021 was not an insurrection. And there's people that have been locked up or still being prosecuted, have been put in prison for years. And the way our federal government has treated them is some of the worst things I've ever seen in my lifetime. They never did this to the violent BLM and Antifa protesters, did they? Rioters. No, they didn't. It's a hypocrisy that should never be forgotten. So as you go to the polls on Tuesday, I want you to carry this with you. Your government should never become tyrannical and lock you down, force you to take a vaccine, muzzle you with a mask. Your government should never become tyrannical to take away your rights and your freedoms. Your government should never become tyrannical to lock up people because they protested an election, because the elections belong to the American people. So on Tuesday, Georgia, let's vote for Donald J. Trump and send him back to the White House.
So you hear it there. That was just 12, 13 months ago. The support is unwavering and unquestioned. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, as staunch an ally as President Donald Trump and candidate Donald Trump at the time could have had on that rally stage in Macon and at countless campaign rallies all across the country. Professor Sands, let's kind of slice time there for a moment, stop time, and I want your thoughts on the tenor of her support and her time in Congress. Did the president have many more vocal allies than her?
No.
That was a declarative answer.
I mean, everybody understood that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the president's acolyte. She beat the drum. She was his staunchest supporter. She annoyed a number of members of Congress when they opposed her because she would go to Trump and get him to try to flex his muscle to get people to do what she wanted them to do. So back then, I don't think their relationship could have been a whole lot stronger.
You point to that kind of flexing of the muscle a little bit. Guys, she exerted and had the capacity to exert a pretty substantial amount of political power and was a prolific fundraiser.
I think it's incredible to see how the dynamic has changed and how quickly it changed. But what stands out to me particularly is the way it's impacted her supporters and his supporters. You hear a lot of the differences between Marjorie Taylor Greene and President Trump, but it feels like even though there's this groundswell of support, particularly here in the district for Congresswoman Greene, it doesn't feel like they have broken with the president.
No.
They have found a way to love mom and dad both equally through the divorce. And it's created this weird dynamic where I think both of them want everyone to pick a side, but no one is doing that yet.
I love that you pointed that out too, because that's not something that we're just seeing here in Georgia. I think that's something that we are seeing nationwide, depending on who you talk to. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you also have Republicans who never liked Trump, the never Trumpers, right, continue to not like him and might be softening a little bit to Marjorie Taylor Greene's words that she's saying just in recent months. But I think that divide that you're seeing, you have people who, I know our Doug Richards did a story just last month coming up here when she announced that she was not going to continue, that she was going to resign. And that is exactly what you heard here in her district. I love Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I also love President Trump. I wonder, though, just kind of bringing it back to when she first came to power, never held political office before, and really kind of emerged to the scene as this star of the Republican Party under the MAGA wing. I know some people don't say it's the MAGA wing, but under Donald Trump. How did she emerge to the top so quickly, having this national recognition, Josh?
There was a lot of strange evolution in that congressional cycle. She started out in a different district and ultimately landed over here in the 14th after sort of a hotly contested early primary scene with, another district, another primary, comes up here, and I think what she tapped into was what I think a lot of people were feeling at the time. It's just, I'm not being heard, I don't appreciate the way things are being done in Washington, and I don't appreciate the way that politicians of both parties are handling things. She tapped into the message that Donald Trump brings, regardless of the substance of MAGA, America First. It was, I don't feel heard, and I want someone who represents me, and that's what Donald Trump that's how he rose to prominence, was tapping into that frustration with both parties. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene did, the frustration with politics as usual in Washington, and believing that someone's going to go there and represent my values, my voice, regardless of what the system is doing or trying to push. That's what she tapped into, and I think people registered so prominently with that because they wanted something different. They felt like she was the person to go get that done.
You talk about that idea of frustration, and I know you all have heard it, I'm sure, in conversations with friends, certainly with potential voters. We've heard it in interviews, countless interviews over the years, and it's something that is cut both ways. We've heard frustration from Democrats and from Republicans over the years, and now we are hearing a real frustration from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in, as she describes it, something she feels like the president has left behind a lot of his campaign promises. And as we all know, and if you're watching, you almost certainly know as well, there were a series of slower but building breaking points over the last year on issues like Iran, an airstrike in Iran, on the situation in Gaza, when the Epstein files ultimately became the real breaking point. If we have it queued up here, I think this is a good time. Let's listen in. This was a press conference and some remarks delivered by the Congresswoman at a press conference outside the Capitol in D.C. surrounding and right around the time of the push, ultimately successful, to release those Epstein files.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. And I've never owed him anything, but I fought for him for the policies and for America first. And he called me a traitor for standing with these women and refusing to take my name off the discharge petition. Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me.
I'm going to go get those Jordans today.
Those are some strong words, and picked up a lot of headlines. The Congresswoman, it should be noted, joined many Democrats who had been pushing to support and ultimately get over the finish line what's known as a discharge petition to force a vote that ultimately led to at least calling for the release of the Epstein files.
And not just Democrats, really standing in line with the victims, the women, and really positioning herself to say, look, I am a woman, I understand you, I hear you.
They were literally right behind her at that press conference.
Absolutely. Fred, we want to bring you in on this too, because you mentioned something during this, when we were listening to it, and that's of populism, and you said it splits both ways. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing about populism is that it cuts both ways, Faith and Zach and all, because Donald Trump, he's a salesman who tapped into a populist moment in 2016. That's really, I say a moment, but it's been a decade now from 2015 to now. And he was able to surround himself with true believers, as populists are able to do. The thing about that is that true believers are true believers, and they expect for you to follow through and to reward that belief. And I think that is really the source of the fissure between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, and we're seeing some of that and with other Republicans as well, is that, hey, they, and in particular their voters, truly believed in the message that what they were being sold, which again was a populist message, right? Hey, we got to make America great again. We're not going to worry about Wall Street. We're gonna drain the swamp and put money in your pocket. But now you're looking at $4.1 trillion in debt. You're seeing more money go to people last name Trump and his friends and all of that. And meanwhile, middle America is really suffering. And up here in Floyd County, again, going back to allowing the subsidies, which is another flashpoint or division point between Taylor Greene and the president.
Not everybody would agree with that.
Well, but she drew the line. We talked about this before in Georgia Votes, that she doesn't like Obamacare, but she believed that the subsidies need to be extended because her people in her district are suffering, and they can't afford that kind of a hit. And so it's just been really interesting to see again that this sword of populism cut in favor for 9 years, and now at the tail end is going in the other direction.
Professor, let's bring you in. You're an academic. You research this. You study it. Situate us in history in this moment right now. What stands out to you?
I think in many respects we brought up the populism piece of this.
Which has a long history itself in American politics.
Goes deep. I mean, we're going all the way back to William Jennings Bryan to see some of the origins of that.
And it still echoes today. I mean, we see the nods on the panel here, right?
Yeah. So this is nothing new, but for such a strident voice to break so severely from the president, which they seem to be cut from the same cloth. And yet that wasn't really where Marjorie Taylor Greene was. Hers was an America first type of populism. And that's one area where she obviously differentiates from Trump, especially in the context of foreign policy.
Yeah.
And he would probably push back on that. Obviously, the president is not here. I can't ask him that directly.
Hey, if he wants to come on, let us know.
Yeah, the invite is always, of course, open. But I'm reminded of some of his recent remarks following the strike in Venezuela. Somebody asked about, one reporter in the press conference said, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said, hey, how is this America first? And the president gave a reply indicating that he believed that element of the White House's foreign policy was, in his view, America first. Now, there are probably some people who would have different views on that.
Yeah. I feel like he sees it as we are taking control of it as America to, in the long run, this is going to be good for you. That is the message I believe he's selling. I do want to pull up, Congresswoman Greene was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker yesterday, and Kristen asked her that. What does America first mean? Does it, Donald Trump says America first means what Donald Trump says it means. Is that what it means? She said, America first should mean what was promised on the campaign trail in 2024. My understanding of America first is strictly for the American people, not for the big banks, not for the big donors that donate to politicians, not from the special interests that constantly roam the halls in Washington, not for foreign countries that demand their priorities are put first over Americans. And this is something that she is continuing to repeat as she really splits apart, I wouldn't say from the Republican Party at all, but really from Donald Trump and entering into whatever era, whatever next political focus will be for her. Josh, I want to pose this question to you. Does that message, going back to what you said just a couple of minutes ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene was speaking to the people of Rome, speaking directly to the people of the district. She was not known in politics. She made her rise. Will this message resonate if she does decide to get back on the political wagon in some way, shape, or form? This America, her version of America first.
You know, I think it depends on what future she decides to chart for herself, to whether or not that will resonate. I think that the America First, so to speak, voters in Georgia 14 are different from the America First voters in Georgia 7, Georgia 9, Georgia 10, down in South Georgia. I think that the makeup of that constituency is different to whether or not they hear that message and are able to have the time that Georgia 14 has had to draw the distinction between, okay, I see her perspective on it, I see his perspective on it, I support them both, and as long as they're not head-to-head, that's okay with me. I think we're really...
He's also on his way out, maybe.
Right. And what it boils down to is when she goes head-to-head with someone who truly embodies that Donald Trump America First vision, because ultimately the people of Georgia did vote predominantly for President Trump's version of America First in 2024. They haven't had a chance to voice that opinion statewide for Marjorie Taylor Greene's perspective. So does she go head-to-head with someone like Burt Jones or Mike Collins and present a head-to-head alternative on what it means to be Trump MAGA versus Marjorie MAGA? I think that's when you see that distinction.
Well, Fred, I know you want to jump in here, and I bet I know why. Go ahead. But I want to pose a global question as you answer and reply to Joshua here, which is how will what we are seeing and what we are learning in real time as Congresswoman Greene has this break with the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, how will that, if at all, color all of the races we're going to see in this midterm year? Because it is a dynamic that is not at all encapsulated just here in the 14th in Northwest Georgia.
Well, I'm going to push back on what Josh said. America did not vote for this late 2025, early 2026 version of America First. What Donald Trump said on the campaign trail is that he was going to end our intervention in foreign wars. He was going to end Ukraine with the intervention there in just a few short days. He was going to end what was going on in Israel and Gaza in just a few short days. And in that presidential debate, he made a big point about that. And so that's what people voted for. They didn't vote for more intervention in Israel and Gaza. They didn't vote for the Ukraine situation to be going back and forth. They certainly didn't vote for this Trump doctrine or Trump version version of the Monroe Doctrine, which is really going back 100 years and saying all the Americas are ours. That's not what people voted for, right? People actually voted against that because they felt that was what Joe Biden and the Democrats, whether you're talking about economic globalism, right, or you're talking about military globalism, that was what they did not want. And so I think Marjorie Taylor Greene would say that she's a purist MAGA, and that Donald Trump, instead of draining the swamp, has actually created a whole other lake over here, and she is still where he was in 2016. And so that creates an interesting dynamic and perhaps fault line in the 26 and beyond elections in Georgia, because all Democrats really need to be successful is for 11,779 Republicans to skip the election or more, and we win. And we saw that in 2020, we saw it in 21, we saw it in 22 with the runoff with Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, and even last year, or in 24, when Kamala Harris only lost by a small margin, but then 2 months ago, when Democrats swept through the PSC election. So this can have some very serious ramifications for Republican electoral outcomes, not just in Georgia, but across the midterms.
And I think a lot of people are really taking a look at that just from historical perspective. I want to shift things back over to Eric to ask you, I mean, year after year, election after election, politicians politic, as some people say. They make the campaign promises. They might follow through some of them. They might try to follow through others. Congress might push back. People are happy, people are not happy. Historically looking at it, was there one person that you felt like made campaign promises and really got it right?
And Professor, this is going to be the last word because we've got about 60 seconds left. So the last word is yours here.
Well, this is where I will give some praise to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think she did, for the most part, live up to her campaign promises, her version of America First. And when it came to choosing between her loyalty to Trump and loyalty to her ideology and her principles, she went with the latter. I think there's also a significant piece that she also sees herself as being very recalcitrant for contributing to the culture of toxicity in politics. She was recently quoted as saying, "I hate politics," which is quite a thing coming from someone like her. But she attributed a lot of that to the assassination of Charlie Kirk and seeing his wife come forward and forgive the man who killed her husband.
And that was, Professor, and we're short on time here, but I think that's probably a good place to end it, because that was one of the flashpoints and turning points of this past year, a remarkable year, and sometimes tragic year in our politics. We're beginning this new year here now in 2026, midterms, a lot of elections. We're going to see where it all goes. That's it for us on this special extended edition of the Georgia Vote Political Roundtable from Berry College. We'll see you this Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.